Oh, g'day champions, we've got a lovely old Vibrolux Reverb amp here, 1965 I think it is. It's in for a recap and service, so let's see how original it is, what work's been done to it, because it's guaranteed to be work done to it. Every single friggin' amp's got work done to it, champions, but how good is the work? We're about to find out. Now just be aware that you are seeing this a week later than the members did. So if you want some more exclusive content, some of these amplifiers I'll do an assessment video, and if they don't go ahead with the repair, that video may never see the light of day of light. I need another coffee. However, the members will see everything. They see it all. Don't worry, my pants stay on. Now, unfortunately, someone's painted their name up here in white paint, or it looks like maybe whiteout. So it was originally from Canada, Montreal. It's got the guy's name there, so I won't dox him. And it's got his address too. But I might offer him, you know, I'll see if I can clean this stuff off. It might take a bit of soaking and scrubbing with some various solvents that won't hurt the vinyl. So we might have to do a little test on that, see if she comes off. I'm not using anything too aggressive, but maybe they might want to leave it on. Who knows? So I've got a little bit of spillage or something on the front panel here. Rock and roll, a bit of bourbon for added flavour or something like that. So we'll see if we can clean that off while we've got the knobs and everything off. But the grill cloth's in remarkable condition for an amp of this age, and it looks original. It's got that nice patina to it, and it's nice and taut still, which is great. Alrighty, so I've taken the back cover off for a quick look-see, and straight away you'll notice a few curious things. So for starters, there's no rectifier valve. Now the customer didn't mention anything about that, so I'm assuming since they were using it in this condition, that it's got some kind of solid state rectification soldered to the back of the socket there. So as long as all the voltages are sorted out through the thing, she's not going to sound like a Vibrolux, but it'll still work. But you've got to bias it to suit those higher voltages across the board. Speaking of voltages, we've got a snapped off voltage selector knob. He did mention maybe trying to find a replacement of these switches and a new knob, primarily for cosmetics. I advised him that it's a good idea to hardwire it to 240 volts if there's no intention of using this for other voltages, because it's in Australia and we're girt by sea. So we may as well wire it to 240 volts, but from a cosmetic standpoint, I could find something else on there to install on there, and then the red knob that goes along with it. However, because this does happen, they are getting a bit hard to find, so we might have to pay some exorbitant fees if they want the original parts. But, you know, ask the question, never assume your customer's budget. This is a valuable amp. They may want it returned to stock as closely as possible anyway. So I think this must be one of the earliest ones with the composite front panel, a chipboard or whatever you want to call it in your region, but not plywood is what I'm trying to say. Look to be the original drivers. Might have to look up the codes. I can see the codes on the cones there. I don't know a lot about the various speakers. Again, I'm not a amp historian. I try to make them work and sound good, but I probably should get more into that. There's so few hours in the day, champions. I'll let you nerds tell me all that stuff, because even if I do put up the correct answer, you'll tell me I'm wrong anyway, won't you? So it's got a European plug, Euro trash plug. We'll replace that with a molded cord to suit our mains plugs. Down here we've got the tube complement chart, which originally shows a GZ34 or 5AR4 there as a rectifier. And then your usual 6 valve setup found in all the Fender dual channel reverb amps. So it's Vibrolux Reverb AA864. Production illegible. Export 117 to 230 volts. Got the foot switch here. I don't know if that's original. I don't think they came in a black color. I think they're all chrome, so that might be a replacement, but it's a pretty old replacement. It's had a tough life, so we'll be opening that up and checking that out. On the other end, you've got Switchcraft's worst ever RCA connectors that they ever made. But the right angle ones that I like putting on there, they're like $25 each or something ridiculous. They are fantastic, but damn expensive. You're talking $100 or $150 worth of connectors if you're going to replace all of them on this amp, on the reverb tank end as well. But I do hope there is a special place reserved in hell for whoever designed these connectors, because they suck. There's a whole gut load of solder on that one, and they love to break the leads right here. What you need is a right angle connector. However, right angle connectors are kind of hard to find. Not many companies do them, and if they do, they're either incredibly good quality like the Switchcraft ones, or they're incredibly shit like the generic plastic ones you find on hi-fi stuff. We'll crack open the speaker jack as well and just have a look and see if the wiring's up to our standards in there. It looks original, so it's probably fine, but it's a critical connection. We want to double check that. Alright, let's get this thing out of its home and onto my bench. But before we do that, champions, here's a lesson for you budding techs. If you don't check this, it'll bite you in the ass every single time. Always check the viability of the reverb tank and the speakers, because they are pretty expensive parts, and if you forget to measure them, you'll finish a full service on the amp, you'll put it back together, and then you'll find either the speakers or the reverb tank need replacing, and the customer won't want to pay that because it's not in the quote, even though if you did pick it up, they would have had to pay it anyway, but they start an argument and you go back and forth, and it's just not good. So you want to nip that stuff in the bud as soon as the amp comes in, so you can say straight away about what they're going to expect cost-wise for the parts. So we've got the send coil there, 1.8 ohms. That's about what we want. 8 ohm impedance, 1.8 ohms DC resistance is about in range. And we've got the return coil sitting around 169, 170 ohms, which is about what we'd expect as well. So at least we know the cables and the coils are relatively intact. We'll visually inspect the tank as well before we fire it up, just to make sure the springs are good too. While we're at it, we'll also check the DC resistance of the sprecher. We're sitting at about 4 ohms. So another thing that'll catch you out is, yeah, sure, it's all good to know that you've got the proper DC resistance on the speakers there, but do they sound any good? Or do they have any weird rattles? Is there any voice coil rubbing? Is there any polling, we call it? Is there any rips in the cone? Anything that sounds weird? Because the customer will sometimes conveniently forget that it was doing that before the repair and then try and pin that on you. So check that as well. So everything's up front. Just got my signal generator there. We'll give it a sweep. All right. Oh, we've got about 100 hertz there. Work our way up. See if there's any weird resonances. No, it sounded pretty good. What I will do, go back to about 100 hertz. Just move the baskets around a little bit. No, they're sounding pretty solid. So I think the speakers are about as healthy as we could expect, given the age. Alright, champion, she's on the bench. Let's check our valves. A lot of no markings. All the markings have been rubbed off. I'll have a closer look and see if we can determine that everything's in the correct positions as it should be. We've got two 6L6s here from Philips, made into USA. So we'll test them and make sure they're good. They look visually fine. We'll see if they are electronically fine. What is not fine is these caps. They're still original from 1964, 36 weeks, 64, you can see. Work backwards, 36 weeks, 64. And this one over here, 16 microfarad, that's an odd one out, so that might have been replaced earlier in the amp's life. But that's a 64 as well, 26th week. So the customer's realistic about these. He's understanding that they should be replaced for the amp to perform optimally and reliably into the future. You can sort of have originality or you can have long-term reliability. You can't really have both. When people want a vintage amp, well, guess what? When this amp was built, it didn't have 60, 70-year-old caps in it. So if you want an amp to sound like a vintage amp, you actually have to put new caps in it, believe it or not. Because all those recordings you listen to, that sound you're going for was when these caps were new. Not when they're worn out or, you know, in the more violent cases, exploding inside the doghouse. So looking at the transformers, 606414, so that'd be 14th week of 64. We've got 606434, so 34th week of 64, and 45th week of 64 on the output transformer. So I think all of these are original. Down there you got the vacant rectifier socket, and I think I can see some diodes down through the hole there, so we'll flip her over and have a look. Alright, champions, so remarkably clean compared to most of the stuff I get in. Looks pretty much all original, except those diodes that we discussed over on the rectifier socket there in the mains lead. They really wrestled those thick leaded diodes into place. You can see the sort of shape they're in. So I'll ask the customer if he wants to sound like a Vibrolux or if he wants to keep these in, because we'll have to bias it to whatever case. But yeah, again, we've got these bits of heat shrink here, which they're actually on pretty firmly, but I like to actually fold the leads over before heat shrinking them there. But that's the rectifier heater. So if we do go back with a valve rectifier, we're going to have to extend those wires out to reach the relevant pins. We've got the voltage selector switch there. At the moment, that wafer, the phenolic wafer, is actually pretty flat, so not the end of the world. These often go real distorted. Maybe it's due to humidity, that kind of thing. But I don't trust these switches as far as I can throw them. So I do like, if I can, to at least wire it to 240 volts and then leave all the other windings isolated with either heat shrink or just connected to this switch still, but just not connected to the actual pole itself. And actually looking at this, you know what? All this new wiring here, which isn't mains rated, by the way, this cloth wiring, so that's not good. We'll have to replace all that stuff. There's no approval ratings on that wire. They've actually hardwired it to that tap already, so they have already disconnected this switch because there's no connector in the middle there, no connection to the pole there in the center. So that's actually good, but I don't like this wire, particularly not for mains. For HTs, you know, that's one thing because it's isolated, but on the primary of the power transformer, that's no go to use this stuff because it's not mains rated. And when you buy it, they do say that in the description. If you're buying from a honest, reputable vendor, they say do not use for high voltage or above, you know, 100 volts, 300 volts, whatever arse covering that they decide to phrase it as. Right down here, we've got all the original solder joints there, which is fine. I wouldn't mind just redoing them just to make sure there's no funniness happening between the different unlike metals that can build up over the years. I would like to change this to an artificial center tap for the heaters, just to get the noise really low and have some fusibility there on the heaters as well, instead of, if there is an HT to heater fault, all the return current goes via this wire. So that can damage stuff more than it needs to. Moving along, we've got all the original screen grid resistors. We'll test them for drift. We've got all the original carbon comps by the looks of it. All the original film caps. Looking up here, it looks like we've got some replacement bypass caps up here. They were probably originally these dual section caps or similar. This one here is 25 and 25 and 25 volts. So someone's replaced these two over here at some point. But looking at the age of these things, they probably need replacing again. What is that? 14. I have to pass that date code, but I'm leaning towards 1983, which is older than I am, and that's saying something. All these blue moldeds might be okay. They don't necessarily leak or go short circuit almost like clockwork like the Astrons do. So we'll test them and just check. Well, we'll fire the amp up and test that they're all good once we've done all the other stuff. You can see up on the BIOS board here, someone's replaced the filter cap on there at some point, but again, this looks like a really old one as well. It's got the original diode, so I'll be changing that and the carbon comp out just for reliability's sake. There's no magical tone sparkles to be had from those components. What we're after here is reliability. You can see down here someone's been tweaking the BIOS adjustment. They've got a 15k in parallel with the factory 27k. So that would be dragging the BIOS range well, to a less negative voltage, so closer to ground. So that would be heating up the output stage quite a bit more than the factory 27k. Maybe that's because the valves are on their way out and they're struggling to conduct, so they're trying to pull the grids back to make them to flog them like a rented mule, like a redheaded stepchild, until they finally give up the ghost. Up here we've got some funkiness happening on this solder joint, so I think what's happened is that solder joint loves to crack because there's no relief in this lead, and the board can flex that way and warps over time, putting a lot of stress on that joint. So that one on the slope resistors up the front end, and this 220k down here, they're known for breaking their solder joints there, but it looks like someone's been in there and reflowed them, so whoever it was knows their stuff and is aware of this. Everything on the front panel appears to be stock and in really good nick. No one's been spraying tons of goo on the pots like you often see in these vintage amps. This amp's been well taken care of, and it's really good to see. It's becoming rarer and rarer that people understand the value that they've got in their hands, and it's good to see when people respect and take care of their amp, so that's good. Oh, there's a little factory wire offcut sitting there stuck in the flux. We'll get rid of that. So interesting on the date code here, TB08 6, looks like 5, but almost looks like it's white ink there and there. I don't know if it's just corroded it or what, but so 65, and all the parts being 64, and sort of later in the year in 64 leads me to think that, yeah, definitely a 65. Alright, so again, we know what we've got to do to this one. Stick around if nothing more happens. If they don't approve the quote, this will be a members only video. If they do approve the quote, g'day everybody, because it's been made public. Also be aware that the members would have seen it a week before you. So if you want to keep the finger on the pulse, legends, keep my feet to the fire, become a bloody legend. Well, you're already a bit of a legend, but you can become a true blue legend. Just join the memberships. But if not, subscribe. You'll eventually get all the same material anyway, providing that the jobs go ahead. We'll try and do a multi-part like we normally do, where first video assessment, second video repair, third video results. That's what I try to stick to, unless there's some big open-ended repair or something very simple, which we might compress down to one video. Anyway, I've spoken enough. See you on the next one.